Good morning and welcome to our virtual service here at Palmetto Presbyterian Church. I can't help but think the opportunity to hear the music we've heard in the time before the service makes it all worthwhile. So special thanks to Barbara Harrell for the music she has picked, and certainly to Karen Yuga as well for that prelude. As we gather together today, we may well have a special visitor with us on the service, but certainly we will have him in the service. And I am speaking of Tony Last, who is a member of our choir, a tremendously talented musician who lives part of the year in England and part of the year here. And we are always blessed to have Tony around, even if it's by Zoom. And so today's service is extra special in that regard as well. I would like to let you know of some of the things that are happening in the church while we're not able to gather safely to worship yet. That doesn't mean that activity and ministry in the church has come to a standstill, far from it. This past week, I have been working with our session, and they approved with unanimous consensus that we submit a preliminary application for a presbytery blessing grant to help underwrite a community garden that we are looking to start on the south acreage of the church property. And as more becomes available, I will be glad to let you know of that. And Joan Bryden has been working extra hard at this for well over a year, going on 2 years. And we're very excited about this. The session was excited as well. And we see this as being a tremendously wonderful way to reach out into our community. And so in time, we look forward to Palmetto Presbyterian Church being known for the church, for the thrift store, and for the community garden that we have. As time unfolds, I will share more and more details with you, but the crucial first step is applying for the blessing grant, and if it is approved, it will be the linchpin for several other grants and ways we will use to begin to underwrite this tremendously important project, not only in the life of our church, but in the life of our community. Also, I want you to know in the coming weeks, I will be calling as many of our year-round residents as possible and talking to you about something we've been planning called Lunch and Learn. And this is, in all likelihood, the very first way we're going to be able to reopen up our church in a very deliberate and safe way in groups of 8. And I will be sharing much more about that in the days and weeks ahead. But we're excited about this as a way of being able to see one another and reconnect in responsible, safe ways. Obviously, as long as things are going haywire in our state, we're going to be very, very cautious. And I just want you to know that. As we continue our time of worship together, I invite you to listen, perhaps even sing along to our opening hymn, which is "We Are God's People." It's probably not familiar to all of you, but it is a wonderful hymn, and I'm deeply appreciative to the women's ensemble who is singing that for us today. I invite you to let the message of it touch your heart and spirit.
We are God's people, the chosen.
him in time. But in the meantime, let us continue with our service today. And I want to read to you a portion of one of the epic stories of the Old Testament. It's part of what is known as the Joseph narratives. And let me give you a little background before I read this story. Joseph was the youngest son of Jacob, or Israel as we come to know him now, and he was a favorite son, and he was pretty difficult to live with in terms of his relationship with his older brothers. And he was difficult because he was a dreamer, and he had these dreams and didn't hesitate to tell his brothers about them, that they would be bowing down to him and worshiping him, and he would be in charge of them. As you might guess, that didn't set very well. As the story unfolds later, we'll hear of yet another youngest son that is very special to Israel. But at this point, that place is occupied by Joseph. And that's where our story begins today, with his brothers more than just a little upset with him. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." He answered, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring word back to me." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields. The man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I am seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the flock?" The man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him from a distance, and before he came near to them, they conspired to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come, let us now kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he delivered him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand and restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the long robe with sleeves that he wore, and they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty, and there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels carrying gum, balm, and resin on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers agreed. When some Midianite traders passed by, they drew Joseph up, lifting him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes. He returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone. Where can I turn?" When they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped it in the blood, then they had the long robe with sleeves taken to their father, and they said, "This we found. See whether it is your son's robe or not." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe." A wild animal has devoured him. Joseph is without a doubt torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his garments and put on sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters sought to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning." Thus his father bewailed him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him to Egypt, to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. There is much in this story for us to explore. We won't be able to all today. But for example, on the surface, Reuben, the oldest of the sons, almost looks like a heroic character. But when you begin to examine him, he comes up far less of a shiny character. He comes up as a rather pathetic character. I mean, after all, when you know your brothers are plotting to kill your younger brother, why in the world would you go off somewhere and come back, thinking that then you'll rescue him? And his comments at the end are very telling and indicate that perhaps Reuben was more interested in what he would have to do and how he would have to defend his role as the firstborn son who was responsible for his youngest brother. But I want to look really in more depth at the price of jealousy, for it is a steep price. And the first thing we can say about jealousy is that it destroys our perspective. Listen to the story again as the brothers are plotting to kill their brother, their younger brother. And then as if somehow they're acting out of a sense of family loyalty, they decide just to sell them off into slavery, that somehow that is a more noble action. It is not. Their jealousy of the favor of their younger brother who received the multicolored coat from his father and had the dreams about them, the jealousy destroyed their perspective. They could no longer see their brother as flesh and blood, even though they give lip service to it. They saw him as either a problem to be excised or a chance to make some extra money and take care of the problem in the process. Can you imagine what it would be like in our families if we lost perspective like that? If our families became not centers of warmth and care and safety, but transactional centers, where we only value a person or people based on what they mean to us and how they fit in our lives. Sadly, that happens. Jealousy destroys our perspective. And when it destroys our perspective, it gets in the way of our capacity for gratitude. For you see, jealousy is always focused on what we don't have instead of what we do have. Gratitude grows after taking into account what we do have. Jealousy is built upon what we're missing, what we lack. Perhaps you're as concerned as I am that we live in a culture that is continually bombarding us with what we're missing, what we're lacking. but that message is reinforced in too many ways and too many situations that undermine our capacity for gratitude, and even worse, create the conditions ripe for hatred, for distrust, for envy, for all the things that drag the human spirit not to the heights of its best, but to the gutter of its worst. Years ago, I used to enjoy going every summer to an event we called the College of Preachers, and all the pastors of churches in this section of Ohio would gather together, and we would hear wonderful speakers, and we would have a chance for interchange. And one of the things we always enjoyed when we were in the Mount Union area and on the Mount Union campus was to go to the local friendlies, which was about a mile's walk. So we justified our sinful behavior at friendlies with the fact that we were walking a mile there and a mile back. It was a pretty flimsy justification, but we did it anyway. And we would share about what was happening in our churches and how things were going in our ministry. And one of my colleagues said, I've got to share with you the most amazing thing that has happened over the last month in my church. One of the people who I would have considered to be a stalwart in the church came in to talk to me. And he said, I've been carrying this burden for far too long, and it's destroying me. He said, I pretend that everything is going all right, and I act like I'm a person of deep faith around the church, but if people only knew what I'm about to tell you, they would see me far differently, and I've realized I can no longer carry this burden. And so as the pastor assured him that he would maintain his confidence, he said this, I hate my little sister. Now the pastor was a little bit shocked because he knew the family, and this was the first time he ever heard of a little sister. And the man went on to say, you've never heard of my little sister, have you? And the pastor said, well, no, I haven't. And he said, well, that's because she doesn't exist. She was never born. But I was born the second son of my father, and my father desperately wanted to have a little girl. And so throughout my life, he let me know over and over and over again what a disappointment I was to him because I was not the little girl that he had his heart set on. And so over the years, I've become incredibly jealous of this little girl that never was. For all the special moments potentially with my father that it robbed me of. He said, my jealousy has turned into hatred, and the burden of that hatred is just more than I can bear. And so that's why I'm here this day to talk with you, because I've got to do something. And the pastor listened to him and shared what has become wonderful advice that I have shared over and over and over again. He suggested to him that he spend some time every day until he no longer had to, every day lifting up his hatred for the little sister that was never born, and his grief for the moments, special moments that he never had with his father. And about a year later, the man came back into his office. And he said, I can't find the words to thank you. That burden that was crushing me, I've been able to lay at the feet of my God, and I feel for the first time in years free and alive. And I found myself being able to be grateful for things once again. And I just want to thank you for that. Jealousy has a terrible price that comes with it. It will rob us of the joy of life and get in the way of our capacity for gratitude, and so easily turn to hate and envy. But it does something else. It turns us away from God. It gets our lives going in the opposite direction. And as I was thinking about that this week, I couldn't help but think of the story that happened many, many years ago in the youth group where I was serving. And 3 girls who were vivacious, exciting, energetic young girls had been accepted at Ohio State, and they were going to travel from the suburb of Youngstown known as Boardman, and they were going to drive from there, and they were going to go down to Columbus and see the campus and do some of the things that you do when you're getting ready to embark on a college education. And so they headed off early in the morning. It was Vicky and it was Christy, and I believe the 3rd girl was Kelly. And off they went, and they got on Interstate 11 on their way to pick up 680 across to 75 to go down, or 71 to go down to Columbus. And they did what they were so used to doing. Once all 3 were in their car, they were talking a mile in a minute. And if there had been a 4th person in there, I'm sure they couldn't have gotten a word in edgewise. They were laughing and talking, and they drove right by the exit to 680. And they kept on going, just thinking all was going well, feeling good about the great time they were making. And all of a sudden they found themselves in Ashtabula, Ohio, which is right on Lake Erie. And let me suggest to you, to give you some points of geography if you're not familiar with Ohio, they took the trip as if they were going to Tampa and got on 75 headed to Tampa instead of 75 headed south to Fort Lauder, to the Fort Myers area and across to Miami. So they were way out of their way, and moms called seeing if they had made it because there was no call back, and that was part of the instruction, and they hadn't made it back. And then a call came, and they were terribly lost. And so we got them directions on how they could finally get back to 71, and instead of going back down to 60, it involved going across northern Ohio and through Cleveland and picking up 71 and down. And they finally got to Columbus. And then they finally got home that night, very tired, weary travelers. And the next Sunday, we were doing what we typically did in our youth group. We sat in a big circle and we kind of checked in on how things went for the week. And as you might gather, their episode had gone viral before we had Facebook. And as we were coming up to Vicky being able to share, one of the boisterous senior high boys shouted, "They went to Columbus by way of Ashtabula. How did that work?" And Vicky had her chance and said, yes, we did. I've got to admit it. And we would typically ask, was there anything you learned from what you experienced this week? And so I asked that question. And Vicky's first comment was, and before she could get it out, another boisterous senior high boy said, you can't get to Columbus by going through Ashtabula without it being a pain in the neck. He didn't use all the words I'm sure he would have liked to, but that's what he said. And she said, yeah, you're right, but I learned something else. And I will always remember these words coming from a young teenage girl. That when we head away from God, coming back to God is almost always more difficult than when we turn to God in the beginning. Powerful words for a teenage girl. I'm not surprised Vicky went on to become a youth director and has had an impact on many kids across the years. Now she's not just a young woman, she's a middle-aged woman. And I can't even begin to calculate the ages of those kids in my youth group because it would throw me into total shock. But those words are so powerful. When we head away from God, the journey back is always more difficult. Not because God has moved, but because of the direction we've gone, and jealousy takes us in the wrong direction every single time. But that is not all of the story. It took the brothers in the wrong direction as they sold their brother into slavery. And as they hurt their father deeply, and lo and behold, found that their words of comfort fell on deaf ears. But that's not the end of the story. As the story ends, we get this little detail. So easy to pass by. The Midianites sold Joseph to the Egyptians, to Potiphar, a captain in Pharaoh's guard. That little detail is a reminder to us of an incredibly important truth. That even though we may go away from God, even though jealousy can destroy our perspective and with that the poisoning of our hearts, God never goes away from us. God's hand is always a part of our lives, whether we realize it or not. God's hand is always undergirding us and sustaining us. I'm in a pastoral support group here with pastors, Presbyterian and other pastors from the greater Sarasota, Bradenton, Palmetto area. And one of my colleagues was sharing that he was getting ready to go up to North Carolina to see a brand newborn granddaughter. And he was so excited to do that. And he shared the backstory of that trip. You see, the daughter, who was the mother of this granddaughter, at one point in her lives, her late teenage years and early 20s, had gotten involved in drugs. And that had led her to a very difficult life, had caused immense pain for my colleague and his wife. And he said there was a time when we didn't know if we'd ever see our daughter again. All we knew was she was probably sleeping under a bridge somewhere. And he said, now we get to go see our granddaughter. She has made tremendous strides. She has joined 12-step groups and is working on her life. And we think she has a wonderful opportunity and chance to stay clean. And this little granddaughter is healthy. And we feel so incredibly blessed. God's hand is at work even when we don't know it. But perhaps you're saying to yourself, well, what about the person's daughter, the family's daughter, that doesn't make it out from under that bridge, who dies, or any of the other tragedies that take place in life? What about that? God's hand is still at work. Because you see, what we see and understand as life is like looking at the trailer of a movie. It only contains the smallest part of the story. And because God is always a part of our lives, we can know with tremendous assurance and peace and joy that the end of our life is not marked by a period called death. It is marked by an exclamation point called eternal life. There's a tremendous price for jealousy. But I want to close with this. If you were following along in the story, you may have heard that while Joseph was still far off, his brothers plotted to kill him. But there's another story in the New Testament about a younger son who, while he is still far off, his father sees him and runs out to greet him and throw him the greatest feast of all. That's the God whose hand is in our lives, and who proclaims our destiny is an exclamation point. Amen. It is a tremendous sense of honor and joy that I take this time to welcome Tony Last from England to share in our special music. It is always a joy when Tony shares his talents with us. I invite you to enjoy them as well.
Soul
is always a joy to have Tony and Gail with us when they can. And having Tony share with us is the next best thing. But I look forward with great anticipation to your trip back across the pond, Tony and Gail, to be with us. Would you join me in the spirit of prayer? Lord, as we gather today in prayer, it is in the midst, for sure, here in Florida and elsewhere, of this raging pandemic we call COVID-19. And it is not just something that is on the news, but too often it touches people whose names we know, even within our family and extended family. It is deeply personal. It is terrifying. And it is heartbreaking. And so not just the people we know by name, but those who are beyond, the families that are brokenhearted in grief, the families that are terrified of what an unknown future might bring, those who long to be able to hold a loved one's hand but cannot, those who feel helpless and perhaps even hopeless. Each and every one of those people we lift up to you and ask that you will bring them the comfort that only you can bring, that you will bring to them the peace that only you can bring, that you will bring to them the healing that only you can bring. And we ask as well that you be with every family who's grieving the loss of a loved one, those over 150,000 families that have been torn apart. Plant within each a conviction of Easter and the hope of Easter and the certain hope of eternal life. And we pray for every overworked, worn out, overextended doctor and nurse and support person in every hospital. Renew them. Ease the burden of their pain, their frustration, their sense of helplessness too often. Strengthen them as only you can. And we ask you as well to surround all our brave first responders and our brave teachers and students in what seems to be so precarious an opening of schools. And above all, we ask you to cleanse every heart of those we call our political leaders. Remove from each and every heart every vestige of pettiness, every vestige of revenge, every vestige of hatred, every vestige of partisanship, every lust for power, seizing it and holding on to it. And after you have cleansed their hearts, make them servant leaders, shock and surprise all of us. With that, we ask boldly, as we lift up these and all our prayers in the name and spirit of Jesus, our risen Christ, who calls us to pray, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. I invite you to again listen, perhaps sing along with the closing hymn, which is At the Name of Jesus. In a moment, we will share in our benediction, and the response might take you by surprise. It's take time to be holy, and so often we sing that at the beginning of a service, but as I was listening to it once again, it struck me that the words of that great hymn are also wonderful words to go forth into our world with. Would you join me in our benediction? We go nowhere by accident. Wherever we go, God is sending us. Wherever we are, God has put us there. God has a purpose in our being there. Christ, who dwells within us, has something he wants to do through us where we are. And now, as we go forth, I invite you to believe this and to go in the joy of God's power, the joy of God's grace, and the joy of God's love. So be it. So be it.
Take time to be holy, speak often with God.